Right now is an election called coronation elevation to rock star status for Chris Christie last night, according to many. Now the all but certain presidential candidate getting the love of the media embrace today. So what are his chances of winning the nomination if, as many expect, he runs in 2016? And then major mayor landslide. In the biggest election drubbing in 28 years, Bill de Blasio would seem to have a mandate and a green light to do just about anything he wants. The question is, what will he do and just how quickly will that green light change? And later, from a landslide to a rock slide, the mayor of Toronto, fourth largest city in North America, admits to smoking crack, but he's not resigning, may actually keep his job. We will try, stress the word try, to explain. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks for joining us this Wednesday evening, November 6th. Now, the road between Trenton and Washington, not a long one, about a 3-hour ride, but it's the only one that Woodrow Wilson ever made. Now, that trek going from governor to president. Chris Christie appears to want the same shot, but for him, the road from the Garden State to D.C. goes through a very challenging GOP primary maze. So last night, the re-elected governor made his case to the American people.
I know that if we can do this in Trenton, New Jersey, maybe the folks in Washington, D.C. should tune in their TVs right now, see how it's done.
A mammoth win in the final returns there last night, 22-point win over Democrat Barbara Buono. When you do the math here and you see the advantage in terms of registration, it's even that much more impressive. And take a look at the numbers there. And it had the Trentonian, who I thought had, and Andrew caught it this morning, probably the best headline around the region here, crossing out 4, replacing with 2 more years. And if you listen to the acceptance speech last night by the governor and even his press conference today, certainly not doing anything to dissuade public opinion that it is a matter of when, not if, he runs for higher office. Now, there is another measure of how deep the Christie win was. Christie lost only one county in New Jersey. That's Essex, home to Newark. The rest of the state, a deep, deep red in a normally very blue New Jersey. Buono, she won only 4 groups in the exit polls: Democrats, liberals, black voters, and Hispanic women. Every other constituency went Christie. Now, here to talk about it, we have a great political panel. We're going to bring in Richard Brodsky, former New York State Assemblyman, senior fellow at Demos, professor at NYU, Dominic Carter, of course, O'Brien Murray, back after his stint in helping Joe Loda, have a big night last night. I'm sorry, I can't because I can't. OB.
Nice to be back, I guess,
Richard.
Stop helping me.
Yes, and Andrew Whitman, senior political correspondent. We're going to talk about some of the other local races in our region as well last night. Good news for Republicans on some fronts, but when you look nationally, the best argument they had was Chris Christie here. And to that end, anybody surprised by the margin?
Yeah, it was very low. 22 points after the outspending. 58% of the vote.
But it's New Jersey.
He did well. I'm not saying he did poorly, but everybody was saying it was the second coming of Lyndon Johnson. It wasn't. Landslides are 60%. He didn't make it.
Well, it was larger than I expected. I really thought it was going to be inside 20 points. It was probably going to be 17, 18-point win, something like that. Christie did better than I expected. Buono really just didn't seem to get any sort of enthusiasm behind her at all.
Christie did great. There's no question about it. The Democrats didn't rally against him at all, but they didn't rally against him because they like working with him. He can work with Democrats. He works across the aisle. I was talking to a friend yesterday who had a robocall from the Democrats, and they didn't even mention the gubernatorial candidate in the robocall. So that's what Jersey's about right now. It's working together.
Buono ticked off a whole lot of Democrats in her time in the legislature, so she didn't have a lot of equity going into it.
But that wasn't just it, Richard.
No, I know.
From the White House on down. And that's one thing I don't like when it happens because it's very undemocratic. Democrats abandoned her from the White House on down. Yeah. From the moment that Obama and Christie had that hug, they had an agreement, as well as the former mayor of Newark, Cory Booker, that we're going to help each other, and that's exactly what each party did.
Obama didn't even call Christie till today to congratulate him. He called McAuliffe last night, and he called de Blasio last night, but he didn't even call Christie till today.
My goodness.
I'm just saying.
Everybody
you're trying to say
deep breath. Will you? Look, he did well because he didn't act like a Republican.
He's the flavor of the month.
I mean,
stop it.
Flavor of the month.
He did well because he reached across the aisle,
He
Richard.
reached across the aisle, which Republicans aren't doing. He embraced elements that are out of step with the Tea Party catechism. He hugged the president and got criticized for it.
Right.
Now, for Chris Christie to move beyond Trenton will require another hurricane. This one that runs from California to New York.
I like that one. That's good. That's good.
You wait all day to give that one, Richard.
Just one more thing.
No, I
Before
made
we
it up
talk
on the
about his
spot.
chances, and I'm curious your take on it, there's another thing. So if everybody thought that there was just a lot of style more than substance to Christie, politically, if you like the inside baseball of this, look at what he was able to do. He took with the Democratic legislature, he co-opted Sweeney, Sheila Oliver, Cory Booker, and every major Democrat basically stood down. Forget about they didn't run against him. They didn't even campaign against him. Forget about that the president didn't come to town and the rest here.
Why?
Well, because he figured out a way that they helped each other. And that doesn't take a little bit of political skill. It takes a pretty decent amount.
And that is anathema in the Republican Party. If we're talking about his prospects, not his history, his prospects are to go forward in a party which is saying you don't cooperate, you shut down the government, you don't hug
All right.
Obama.
Let me
what
give
he's
the
up
Republicans
against.
some love. And Obi, is it too much to say? I looked in Alabama. We covered there was an open house seat.
Yeah, open test, sure.
I mean, you think about the Chamber of Commerce, not exactly a bleeding heart group here, and other business groups, both local and national, put money in there to beat the Tea Party candidate. Is it an isolated case, or do people say, you know what, we're tired of this purity test. We'd rather win. And if we're going to get behind somebody who's got a chance here, not just in the reddest of states here, but not just to get through a primary, but actually win a general, maybe they've been in the wilderness too long. Do you think Republicans are starting to say, we'll go for moderate, and I'm putting that in air quotes here, like a Christie, because they're tired of going down the path with the Tea Party of what happened just a few months ago and what even happened in the last election season?
Well, let's go back for a second. Christie won because he reached across the aisle. I mean, you can point
And he seemed
anywhere you
authentic.
want at different things, yes. But he's being himself. Today, when he had a press conference, it was covered on national TV. All the cable stations picked it up at this point. What this really means is if he wants to go for it, he can go for it and get the coverage. Way beyond that, he's got a process to go through. He has to do well in South Carolina. He's got to do well in Iowa and New Hampshire. That's the question. Will they rally around him or not? There's not necessarily a litmus test, but all politics is local. And it's a question the question is, can he get the grassroots behind him where he has to be able to execute to win
Will the
elections?
Republican electorate support a guy who hugged Barack Obama?
Depends on the situation. Who's he up against? Who else is in there? I'm
What
not
did-
going to say it's
what
not a
did you
yes
say?
or no. You have to have you can't
I'm
beat
with you
somebody
on
with
that.
nobody, Richard.
Couple of things. The cable picked up Christie today because he's good TV, and I think a lot of cable executives would like to see him run for president because it would make for a good show. It's never too early to get the 2016 parade started. You guys are talking about the GOP, though, like it's a homogenous party at this point, and it's really not. There are some who want a moderate candidate, a comparatively moderate candidate. And by the way, Jeb Bush, the biggest loser last night, is looking at Chris Christie thinking, I'm never going to be president now because that's the guy who's going to eclipse me from the centrist division of the party. But Chris Christie can't win a primary down south. Chris Christie can't win a primary out
See, I'll
west.
tell you why I disagree with you. I'll tell you why I disagree with you. And maybe I've been covering him a little too long, but I've seen him walk into some of the most contentious environments where he's walking in. I told the story yesterday with a bunch of firefighters when he was going to be cutting basically agreed upon packages for them as it related to benefits, et cetera, and he told them why he was going to do it and that he didn't back down. I saw him do the same thing with teachers. At the end of both environments, with the most hostile constituencies because he's taking money out of their pockets, he got a standing O in both environments. He can go to places because there's such a thirst here for somebody who doesn't seem like this package candidate that people will give him a second chance.
Not the Tea Party, not at Iowa,
But this
not
goes-
South
but this goes
Carolina.
back to what
He went to
Andrew
conservative
said.
groups down in groups this year,
but
Richard,
the-
outside of our region, and they gave him
Richard-
standing
Not
O's
the
at the
people
end.
who vote in Republican
But Richard,
primaries.
no.
But
You're discussing
primaries-
regular people.
And not with a
But
Rand
and
Paul
then
running
there's
against
them.
him, and not with a Rick Santorum or a Marco Rubio running
Oh, he
against
would
him.
kick the
No,
whatever.
no, a
but
conservative
but
to his right
That's
in the race
the
against him?
question is who's on the ballot where they run.
Let's say it's
not
Rand
a
Paul.
head. But it's not a head-to-head.
Let's say it's Iowa,
It won't
New
be. It will not
Hampshire,
be a
and-
head-to-head though. You're going to have 4, 5, or 6 candidates. That's what I'm getting at. As you start this process, and as you point out, if it's Jeb and Christie and they split that vote from the center of the Republican
It
Party,
will win
that's going to split that. It depends how much the
Okay,
split
but
is
but
among
Obi,
the
here's my
conservatives.
point. At what point does somebody say, Jesus, we lost Virginia yesterday, not because Terry McAuliffe is some beloved figure, but Cuccinelli's a nut.
Wait a minute,
We
this-
lost Iowa, we
Wait.
lost Delaware,
No,
we
Richard,
lost
the premise
Indiana.
of that is absolutely
How many
wrong.
are we gonna lose
Richard,
by going down?
we lost that race. We lost that race partly because of the closing, also because it wasn't funded the way it was the time before. The Chamber of Commerce,
Cuccinelli's nuts.
4 years ago, the Chamber of Commerce put money in. This time they didn't.
In
4
Virginia,
years
if
ago,
you had a more
4
moderate
years ago.
candidate, you wouldn't have won in Virginia yesterday.
about the same
if you had a more
candidate?
moderate
If there was
candidate?
more money, no one expected that race to be as tight as it was either. That race
You
was about the
guys
money
are
and some of the
talking about
messaging.
this like it's a cocktail party conversation.
no-
It's an election. This
Got
is a
any drinks?
democracy.
Yeah.
This is a democracy. It's not going to be we need a candidate. People are going to go in and vote. And what they're going to vote for, if the past is prologue, is the kind of candidate who is anti-Obama,
If you were
anti-healthcare,
right, Richard,
anti-abortion.
If you were right, we'd never have wave elections in this country. And I can point, almost cyclically, we do. There is a point.
We have
where
them in general
there is a
elections. We
point-
don't have them in primaries.
Okay, but
guys,
he's going to be running
when
in
you
a
look at-
federal if he runs in 2016.
When you look at
Okay?
Virginia-
And my point is there's momentum
if he
that
gets
builds
to a
for this.
general election, he has strengths. He can't get through the primaries.
It depends
I
who
think
else
the
is
worm's
on
done.
the
Yeah,
ballot,
three of us
Richard.
agree on that.
It
We'll see if
depends
you're
who's on
right.
the ballot. That's the question. If it's a
Yeah,
head-to-head,
but
it's
25%
different
of the
than if it's
Republicans
5 or
There's
6
definitely going to
people.
be at least one conservative running to his right.
There's gonna be more than
last
one.
question on Christie. If he is serious, and almost everybody believes, and I know some people close to it, that it is going to happen, that he runs,
Oh, yeah.
is he better served saying, all right, I'm going to play this authentic card and say, I don't care who I offend, this is what I think? Or does he try and do a Romney where, he capitulates a little bit of his soul every other week and gives a little bit more of a bone to the Tea
He doesn't
Party?
have to give a bone to the Tea Party. He runs on his
It worked for
record.
Romney to at least get through the
but
primary.
he runs on his record, though, is what I'm saying. Where he is on gay marriage, and where at that point, where he is on guns. Remember, he vetoed the legislation that the
He's not
legislators had passed.
Crazy enough for the Tea Party, and crazy is not
But
something
Richard,
you can
I would
toss a
not
bone
use the
on.
word crazy. That's
For the
not
Tea Party?
That is not the way. No, these
the
are
Tea
men
Party.
and women. These are
Okay.
men and women that support candidates across this country. Okay.
But look at some of the candidates
you're
they
you're
support.
telling me
You're
that Al
right about
Sharpton's not
gender, but
crazy?
that's where it
Are you
breaks
telling me
down.
Al Sharpton's not crazy?
Al Sharpton's not crazy.
Really?
You're right.
You believe that?
I believe that.
And on that note, we go to our question of the evening here as the good Reverend even gets in the conversation. Chris Christie is the man we're focusing on this evening. Should he run for president? If he does, do you think, and 3/5 of our table doesn't think so, can he win a GOP nomination? For the record, and I think Obi, maybe you think he could. All right, when we come back, we will go across the river. We'll talk about the win of Bill de Blasio, an unabashed progressive here. Can a liberal agenda work in New York City? And can it get through? And what would it look like? We're going to talk about all those things after this.